They called him El Hechizado, the Bewitched, not because of magic, because his life seemed cursed from birth. A king who could barely walk, barely speak, barely think, yet the fate of a global empire rested on his shoulders. This is the story of Charles II of Spain, the last Habsburg king, a man whose tragic body destroyed an empire. Spain was once the beating heart of a world empire. Gold and silver poured in from the Americas. Armies marched under the Catholic banner, feared by kings across Europe. But beneath the crown was a silent poison, centuries of inbreeding, twisting faces, weakening bodies, shattering minds. Charles II was the final result. In 1661, King Philip IV of Spain desperately clutched a swaddled bundle in his arms. His son, born at long last. After 17 years, his health was good, his features fine, but his jaw protruded like a medieval shield. His tongue so large he could barely swallow. And his head, it dwarfed his little body. Mariana of Austria, the infant king's mother, felt a chill despite the summer heat. Her son was different. Her brother, the Holy Roman Emperor, Leopold I, fretted about the boy, too. Could he rule? Would he marry? Would he live? The child's life hung in the balance. For years past, Charles still couldn't talk. He couldn't walk. His caretakers cowered as he threw himself on the floor, kicking and screaming. They thought he was possessed. In 1665, the king's council grew impatient. Was this child ever going to rule, or would he be a vegetable for life? Queen Mariana kept her son hidden away in the palace, fearing his weakness would destroy Spain. But word spread through the kingdom and then beyond the sea. What was wrong with the young king? Was he even human? As Charles grew, so did his ailments. His body twisted. His mind blurred. At 14, he weighed 100 pounds, thanks to the royal diet of rich foods. But he couldn't eat much. His swollen tongue made it hard to swallow. His gums were bad. He often spit blood onto the floor. His jaw grew larger, protruding so far that he developed neck spurs. Those close to the king were horrified. Too many. He looked less human than beast. Charles's education began late and was haphazard. When he was 15, teachers finally arrived. They struggled to teach him numbers, letters, prayers. He didn't know left from right. He often confused day for night. Servants told stories of finding the king wandering through the halls, drooling, eyes blank. Often they'd find him alone in rooms, holding objects and talking to himself. Other times, he'd rip off his clothes and smear butter on the walls. After a while, the tutors gave up. Charles never learned to read or write. He rarely understood what was happening around him. But there was one thing the king did understand: sex. Charles craved it like a plant reaching for sunlight. Servants, courtiers, even priests whispered of his urges. He pursued women relentlessly, but they fled from him. First, there was Louise de la Vallière, one of France's most beautiful noble women, a former mistress of the French king. Then Marie Anne of Neuburg, a woman known for her fertility, not her looks. Neither marriage produced an heir. Charles never consummated either. Of the 5 women he married, none stayed with him for long. All fled the king's clutches. The unions were blessed, but fruitless. Historians say Charles's problem was his body, but it was also his blood. For centuries, the Habsburg men had married their close relatives, uncle and niece, cousin and cousin. It kept the crown in the family, but ruined the bloodline. By the time Charles was born, the Habsburg family tree was a noose. He was king though at age 3. He inherited a global empire, but Spain was already cracking, bankrupt from constant wars, its armies exhausted, its people starving. Real power lay with his mother, Mariana of Austria. Charles was just a figurehead. Europe watched like vultures. France's Louis XIV wanted the throne. Austria plotted to keep it. Spain was a rotting prize, and Charles the lock they all wanted to break. At 18, Charles became his own master, but he was still unfit to rule. He seethed with frustration. Everyone knew he wasn't quite right. While he remained locked in his world, Europe pressured Mariana to find her son a bride. There was one woman who met the criteria: Marie-Louise of Orleans, young, beautiful, full of life. She loved horses, dancing, laughter, but in the stifling Spanish court, she withered. As the king's bride, she was prisoner to tradition. The wedding went well enough. She liked Charles, the gentle giant, though, and spent time with him. But soon she noticed he could never quite look her in the eye, and she realized why. The king was utterly terrified of her. She had heard stories, rumors, whispers of his strange behavior. What if the king forgot she was there? What if he attacked her? She couldn't risk it, so she averted her gaze from the king whenever she could. She could not have known that this tiny slight would only make things worse. For weeks, Charles waited for his new wife to look at him, to accept him. When she finally did, he pounced. He ripped off her dress, threw her on the bed, but she screamed, not with lust, with fear. Charles froze. Marie-Louise struggled. She hated the king's touching ways. She loathed his drool dripping down her neck. She spat at him. "Dirty animal," she cried. "I am your queen, not your servant." Shocked, Charles stumbled back. The couple never slept together again. The king never touched his wife. She bore him no children. Charles retreated further into his shell. Alone in his room, he talked to spiders, played with flies. He ate off the floor. Once, he fell into a vat of wine, nearly drowning. His attendants found him there, shouting, "Help me, I'm dying." Sometimes they'd hear the king scream in the middle of the night, "Take it out, take it out." Some said he dreamed of food being stuffed into his mouth. Others said he dreamed of flies crawling under his skin. Within the palace walls, servants whispered that the king was bewitched. Rumors spread to France, to England, to Italy. Soon, everyone was asking the same question: what's wrong with Charles II? Now in his 30s, he needed an heir. If he failed to produce one, the entire Habsburg dynasty would end. His doctors suggested another bride, Maria Anna of Neuburg, a woman known for her fertility, not her looks. She agreed to marry the king, but only if he promised to stay away from her. She accepted the union, but she never agreed to consummate it. Once again, Charles found himself alone in a darkened room. He ran to the door, pounded on it, screaming, "Open this gate! Open this gate!" Then he collapsed on the floor. When his servants arrived, he was kneeling before them, babbling, "The mice are coming. Help me, please help me." As always, they led him away from the door, back to his room. There, his servants bathed him, fed him, dressed him, like a child. The king was broken. By 1698, Europe braced for war. If Charles died childless, the map would change in blood. Charles turned to the supernatural. On December 7, 1697, he ordered the exhumation of his ancestors. He stared at their bones, searching for answers. Doctors examined him in his last year. His heart was the size of a walnut, his lungs corroded, his intestines rotting, his skull filled with water. They said he had the body of a 95-year-old. He was 39. When Charles died on November 1, 1700, his demise unleashed the War of the Spanish Succession. Millions would die, the empire would shatter. But as he lay dying, the king was serene. Maybe he was bewitched, not by demons, but by the curse of his own blood. Thanks for watching.